Great, thanks. So, I am just delighted to be here today and see this crowd and to feel the energy and to hear the issues that are coming up in the room and in the presentations. It's a very exciting moment for me. Actually, this is our third one of these, and I think we're seeing that the momentum is actually building. It's not disappointing at all. It's wonderful to see. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the inception of this classroom initiative. Why? Why did we do this? I've got some quotes here from my good colleague Dan Koretz from Harvard in his wonderful book, The Testing Charade, Pretending to Make Schools Better. And I was going to give my own thoughts on this, but I read through these recently. I felt this is just a great summary, a very fair summary. And he says, the best estimate is that 30 years of test-based accountability may have produced modest gains in elementary school mathematics, but no appreciable gains in either reading or high school mathematics. That's what we got for our 30 years out of standardised testing. However, as he points out, there are many widespread and serious negative effects. Students waste time on all manner of undesirable test preparation. That's any preparation that isn't teaching them the subject, just teaching them the test. There's a corruption of the ideals of teaching. I think we don't pay as much attention to this as we should, but I think making teachers cynical and so on is a bad thing. Gratuitous and often enormous stress for educators, parents, and most important, students. I don't need to say any more about that. Undermine the provision of trustworthy information about student achievement through score inflation. You've all seen that. And perhaps even worse, he says, these bogus score gains are even more serious in some schools than others, in particular schools that serve disadvantaged students. And he spends a whole book explaining each one of these points. I highly recommend it to you. So that's why part one. That's sort of the problem, I think, for NCME and in fact, in my view, for the education system in general. Now, why part two? Why should we have an initiative in classroom assessment? And here I'm going to refer to research. Here are some effect sizes. There's lots more for classroom assessment, for the effect of classroom assessment. And just look at these numbers. We have classic work back from Black and William, 1998. They were looking at a range. That wasn't a quantitative analysis, but 0.4 to 0.7. A very nice recent piece of work by some of my colleagues on writing assessment, picking up effect sizes ranging from 0.58 to 0.87. These are huge effect sizes. This is where assessment can make a difference. This is where measurement can make a difference in the classroom. What we've been doing all this time, all this money we've spent, all those psychometricians who got employed, they haven't made much of a difference, unfortunately. So, my wish as president was to have the board support us trying to bring together what's in NCME and classroom assessment. And I very much see this as a two-way thing. How can NCME work to improve the practices and impact of assessment in the classroom? Does it have anything, by the way, is one of the questions we're actually asking. Does NCME have anything to offer? We want to find that out. And then thinking in the other direction, how can working on classroom assessment improve educational measurement and indirectly NCME through that? And as I point out with the arrow, this is a two-way thing. We see this is going both ways. But also, it's a question. And really, this event, along with the other previous two conferences, are part of an experiment to see if we can foster this community of people involved in classroom assessment, give them a chance to come together and have some messages, and then foster ways that they can bring that to NCME and hopefully make that a more useful, educationally useful organisation. I want to point out one more thing about this that I think is crucially important as well. At the moment, we are on a particular cusp. We are on a cusp where IT is making its way deep into our classrooms. We have to think hard about what that means. What I see is a lot of programmers pulling items out of somewhere or other and putting them in their assessment packages. They don't care where they come from. They don't care what it says. They just care that it happens because that's what they're paid for. And we, I think, need to help them and help others who buy their products to understand that there are important educational, assessment and measurement issues involved in that. So that's where the initiative came from. That was my motivation. I was very fortunate to have a wonderful group of people come together and really create this situation we're in today. And I'm going to ask Kristen Huff, who is the co-chair of the task force, to introduce the members.
Good afternoon, everyone. Great. So, in the spring of 2016, Mark asked, I was serving on the board at the time, and Mark asked Dale Whittington, who was also on the board at the time, a district administrator from Shaker Heights, Ohio, and I to co-chair the Classroom Assessment Task Force. We then pulled together an esteemed group of NCME members to help us, including Heidi Andrade from SUNY Albany, Allison Bailey from UCLA, Jade Keynes-Lee, our newest member of the task force from University of New Hampshire, Sue Brookhart from Duquesne University, now retired, Neil Kingston from the University of Kansas, and Caroline Wylie from ETS. So thank you to all of these wonderful members. We have been meeting every Friday afternoon at 3 o'clock since the summer of 2016 on a cadence of about every 2 to 3 weeks. So let's give this group a hand. One of the first charges from Mark and the board was to create a vision statement and a set of goals and objectives. I'm not going to read them to you. They're on your handout. But I did want to share with you a couple of highlights, and specifically this conference is one of hosting or helping to facilitate the creation of this conference is one of them. So Sue's going to talk in a bit about the NCME book series, most recent publication on classroom assessment. Mark is going to share with us a bit about the JEM issue. And I would like to just say, for those of you who are not aware, and I know this is true because I've talked to a couple of you, this fall classroom assessment conference, this is only our third one. This is a grand experiment from NCME in conjunction with the task force to see if there was enough interest from membership and expanding our membership beyond typical NCME folks to attend a conference like this. The first two, in the last 2 years, were at the University of Kansas, hosted by that university with Neil Kingston at the helm. This year we are greatly indebted to Lorrie, Shepard, and Briggs and others here at the University of Colorado Boulder for hosting the Classroom Assessment Conference. I wanted to point out something very important. Next year, the task force is trying something new. It's all part of this grand experiment. We are not hosting a conference in 2020. We are doing something different. The NCME annual conference is in April in 2020 in San Francisco. We are in partnership with WestEd to host a full-day training session for practitioners in the area on a problem of practice in math classroom assessment. And we're really excited about this. We'll see how it goes. We'll see how the local practitioners react to that event and see if it works. And we're right now under consideration about whether we will seek to have another conference in fall 2021. So I ask you to, when you do the exercise that Heidi's going to host in a few minutes, or when there's Q&A, please share with us your perspectives on the utility of this conference, and also make sure that you give us your thoughts in the survey. But thank you all for coming, especially, most importantly, to the practitioners who are here. This is what this is all about. So with that, Sue?
Thank you. The part of the charge to the committee was to increase publications in the area of classroom assessment in NCME venues. Not just any journal, but in NCME journals particularly, and in this case, in the NCME book series. So we have done that, or we have started to do that. And in July, a book called Classroom Assessment and Educational Measurement came out, co-edited by myself and Jim McMillan, who was here, but I think, there he is. We had a lot of fun doing this book. Many of the chapter authors are in this room, but the theme of the book is Mark's two-way street. Theory and research, and this is an academic book, it's not a practitioner book, but theory and research in classroom assessment and theory and research in educational measurement had been worlds apart, or at least too many worlds apart for what Mark's vision was. And so the chapters in this book either talk about ways in which understanding the classroom context can affect educational measurement, or vice versa. We have about half and half. We have some discussant chapters. For me, the most interesting part of the book is that there are several voices in it. Not everybody agrees. In fact, within some chapters, there are authors who disagree with each other. Even about what counts as classroom assessment, which I thought when I went into this book was a foregone conclusion. Classroom assessment is assessment done in the classroom, isn't it? And Jim had a research book came out, had a little definition in it. I thought that was it. Apparently not. So the themes of the book expanded to how can theory and research in classroom assessment inform scholarship in educational measurement? How can theory and research in educational measurement inform scholarship in classroom assessment? And what exactly are we going to call what exactly counts as classroom assessment? We didn't solve that problem, but we have a lot of words talking about it. And I hope that you will get a hold of a copy and find it fun to read. Thanks.
So I am going to talk about a special issue of the Journal of Educational Measurement, which you'll see illustrated there on the right-hand side. It is purposely vague because this actually isn't the cover of our special issue. The printed version has not yet come out yet, but it is out virtually. And I'll talk a little bit about how you get that as well. This was actually invited by the GEM editors at the very first conference. We were, I think, at the refreshments on the first day, having a glass of wine, and George and John came up and said, well, why don't we do a special issue? And I was really pleased by that invitation, and I recruited two co-editors, Aita and Pamela, who happened to be in the room at the time, to come along and join in. It's a challenge in a way, because not all the papers that we might want to put out into a journal, for instance the things that we see today, yesterday, fit into what one might see as the stereotype of the GEM paper. We took that on as a challenge, and we invited a very broad range of papers. One of the consequences of this, by the way, was it took us 2 years to get it out. And those very good people who were ready and had a paper for us right at the beginning have been annoyed that it took us 2 years to get it out. There's some prominent individuals who noted that. But we felt that we had to change the idea of what a GEM article is. We had to broaden it. And we had to do this not only with the authors, but with the reviewers. We recruited 80 new reviewers for GEM, and we left them there on the reviewers list so they can be called on in the future. And we have now come out with, and you can look on the third page of this handout at the list of papers. So I hope there's at least one on each table, one copy of this on each table. Please look around and see if you've got it. And you will see the titles and you'll see the authors. And I must say that I think that a whole bunch of the things I've been to in the last 2 days, they could all end up here too. I think we're changing the vision of what GEM has been doing. I know GEM is one of those ones that looks, people think it's psychometric envy, they want to put more and more equations in. No, that isn't what measurement's about. It's about a lot of things as well as equations. I'm not against equations. Alicia knows that I just adore equations, but I think there's a lot more to measurement than equations and statistics. And the things that we've been talking about here, which I believe are the majority of what's in measurement, those things need to be in that journal. So I encourage you, please, do look at these papers. Do see that many of them are the sorts of things you guys are working on, or beyond. I think you should go beyond that and start sending them in. That's the only way we can change this particular journal. But I think it will change as we do that. So, that encouragement, I'm going to turn this over to Heidi, who is going to organise some discussion.
Hello, everyone. We're glad you're here. We have some really important questions for you. Here's the list of questions, but before we get started, because they are important, I'm going to make a request framed as an invitation. This invitation will fly in the face of conference norms. I am going to invite you to turn off your phones and shut down your laptops, because we know from a lot of research that the human mind literally cannot parallel process, that we rapidly switch back and forth and convince ourselves that we're parallel processing, but really what happens is that we get very shallow processing. These questions are important to us. You know, these questions and your responses to them are really important to us because they will literally shape the future of this conference, the future of the work of the task force, and the future of the classroom assessment field, which is still an emerging field. So this is important stuff. So no shame if you choose to keep your phone in front of you or your laptop up, but what we know from research is the phones need to not just be silenced but out of sight, and laptops need to be not just darkened but folded, and the quality of conversations improves. We want the best of you right now because these are really important questions, and so we're also going to facilitate it quickly. Okay, no shame. You do with your technology whatever you want. This is just an invitation to participate fully right now. All right, so here are our questions. I won't read them to you, but I will ask you to read them, and then I'm going to, here they are again. So we also know from good group processing that people make better contributions when they have some time to think on their own. So I put silent thinking here. And again, it's an invitation to silence, which is not something we do much at conferences. So the invitation is read the questions and do some silent thinking about some or all of them. And then in 2 minutes, I will invite you to turn to neighbors and talk. Okay, that's 2 minutes. Now, see what your neighbors think. Turn and share about all or some of the questions.
And then I don't want to capitalize too much. And I that's my oh, I see.
Take one more minute, please, to finish up your conversation. All right, let's hear from you, please. We have 2 scribes, 3 scribes who have already asked for permission to use their laptops. It was granted. And Lorrie, Shepard has the mic. So why don't we take these questions one at a time, starting at the top. Do you feel that we should continue as a special conference or be incorporated into the NCME conference or something else? And either way, should we meet annually or biennially?
Hi.
Oh, would you mind introducing yourself and your role in life? Are you a psychometrician? Are you
Funny, because what I have to say is like how I have no idea what my role in anything is.
All right, stop right there.
So I'm Sean Irvin. I'm from University of Oregon and a small research shop called Behavioral Research and Teaching. If you know or heard of Jerry Tyndall and the group from Minnesota and curriculum-based measure, that's my bag. So with Jerry. So I wrote down some notes because I'm actually kind of shaking right now. I'm nervous because so I appreciated what Kim said earlier.
We love you. We're loving you right now.
I know who's in the room, and I am. It's a good struggle, but I'm struggling to find my footing personally and professionally. So that's one reason why I'm nervous. But another reason is that my mind and heart have been challenged at this conference in a way that I wasn't quite prepared for, based upon previous conference experiences. And so I just kind of want to say, regarding number one, that this conference has both excited and encouraged me in a number of ways. It has put a pit in my stomach at different times, and especially keynote speakers, like from the very first one with Deborah until today's, have put tears in my eyes at different points. So I think that, and so this is a personal experience I'm kind of unloading right now, but I think when a conference does that, at least for me, it's doing something right. And so I guess that's a testament to the presenters. It's a testament to, I think, having this kind of socio-cultural perspective. And so it's also a testament to both the folks here in Colorado for taking just the load of having this. I know there's a lot that goes into that. And then also NCME National, things that you were just saying, Mark, about inviting new members into reviewers and stuff like that. Those are all steps that could be taken to, I think, kind of widen the breadth, depth, and complexity of what NCME is now and going into the future. So I just really appreciated this conference so far, and I really hope that it continues, whether it's annual or biannual. I know I'm from the University of Oregon. One of my best buds and former colleague is now the director of state assessment there. And Jerry Tyndall, my boss and mentor and good friend, we are would be excited to host this conference. So why is everybody laughing? Did I just have a lot on my plate? She's taking my name. Yeah. Say a different name, like Daniel Anderson, like in the cube next to me or something. So yeah, anyway, we would be. And so and in conversations that I've had with other people, I think that that what I'm saying here might be resonating with other people. The conversation I had after today's keynotes with some district leadership people that I didn't know before today, we were talking about this stuff, and I just, I'll give a real quick example, then I'm going to pass mine. When Dr. Kruk was speaking about owning the tests and that being so important, I've been working on a contract where we are trying to, we are creating kind of animated, quick modules that are geared towards parents and assessment literacy, and building kind of common language around assessments. And one of the things that I wrote, and this is why there's pits in my stomach and stuff, but that can bring some positive things. That one of the things I wrote about in a portion about English language proficiency was that so that parents again get a common language, that students take this assessment and are deemed whether they need language support services, and through those services they are altered. That's my word. In a way that they have access to the assessment and instruction and curriculum, that triad, right? And what Dr. Kruk had me thinking about as I was standing there, or as I was sitting here listening, was that yes, they need to have access to those things. But underlying that are some kind of assumptions and presumptions, like culturally laden, that perhaps it is also the case, or maybe it definitely is the case, that triad, assessment, instruction, and curriculum, need to adapt so that they are accessible to the student. And so that's a process, right? But it is an idea that I think that we need to embrace, like, in our minds and our hearts. So that was an example of how it was changed.
Who else? Question number 1.
So I want to try to see, Scott Marion, Center for Assessment, for unbalanced assessment. So our discussion was, we spent a lot of time on number 1, 90% of our time, and recognize the trade-offs of incorporating this into the annual meeting versus the standalone, and recognizing that we're fresh from this experience, which I've been coming to educational research and measurement conferences for over 30 years. It's probably easily the top 5, and could be better. I put on a conference every year, so I'm biased too. It was a fabulous conference. I don't know that we could think that this is going to be how it is every year, because it was a force of nature we have here to help bring people in and others. So it was a fabulous conference. But I think that trade-off, and I think we generally agree, but people should disagree at my table, that if we incorporate it into the annual meeting, we wouldn't get the number and diversity of practitioners that we have in this concentrated setting, nor would they have the opportunity to interact with folks who have founded this field and are doing the relevant research now. So you get that the collegial interaction, and plus you get the ability to track people in a concentrated way versus trying to pick out sessions through an already overcomplicated program. Is that not fair? So
we didn't answer the annual plan.
Do we have perhaps a different perspective on question number 1?
Perhaps a slightly different perspective, although I agree a lot with what Scott said and the first speaker. With apologies to Pink Floyd, I've become uncomfortably alert through some of this. But just thinking about coming together, it's a great opportunity to come together to talk and to think. But you did say, like, an alternative format. I'd love to see us come together and work. And talking is great, but talking doesn't get us where we need to go, but maybe think about maybe a work group approach where we can come in and actually, start working towards some of the goals and some of the ideas that have been brought to us.
Wow, great, thank you. Other perspectives on question number 1?
Our other perspective was, we thought it was an either or, either at the annual or biannual or the national, but it could be a combination where one year it's, maybe something at the annual that is like a pre-conference or a workshop, and then the next year it could be something like this. So just that we have that.
That is our big experiment for this year. So we're here, then next year we're at NCME with a very different format, and then hopefully in 2021 we'll have a conference like this again. Here you go.
I think we had a lot of the same kind of comments on L4 account and our table, and part of it is that it should be about expansion of membership, not saying not for membership's sake, but because it is about the E in NCME. So to include more members, I mean, you don't want to distract from the main conference, you want to add to it. So it's sort of, if this does continue, then it runs parallel. It's not that it starts to detract from the general one, but the umbrella just gets bigger. And I'm going to pick on my table over here, because you had a really good idea. But I'd love you to share it.
Well, I'm a science educator by background, and I'm thinking that it would really be useful for members of your group to come to the content area conferences like the National Science Teachers Association, the math group, the language arts, all of them, and do some presentations about things that we were talking about here today. And one thing that struck me about the one speaker this morning was she talked about the project with the garden, and the woman that she's working with, it turns out, won the National Science Education Leadership Award this year for the outstanding leader in the country. And so, and I saw that name up there and I went, wow. So, she'd be perfect to come and with Mary Margaret and talk about what they're doing.
Great idea. Thanks for sharing. Any other input on question number 1, including dissenting opinions? We think better when we're willing to disagree.
Yeah. I had an interesting thing to just add to provoke your thinking about it. It was a conscious choice, and I think that it required a little courage to decide to put so big a stamp on our selection of keynotes. And it was a matter of trust that the task force chose us. We didn't reveal, we just hadn't thought about it enough. We hadn't thought about it enough to, we weren't like, had thought about it and did it. Maybe they knew some things from things we've written about what they could expect. But I would be nervous about other stamps depending upon who was selected to run the conference. So
you're going to do it forever?
Hear, hear.
I'm very serious about the need, because we had a conversation about moving the thinking forward, right? And not just being a one-off. Some national associations do regional conferences, and it's mostly a dissemination on knowledge of best practices. And what this is about is a real conversation with practitioners, so that it's not a delivery system. But then you have to think about what is the message and a set of conceptual understandings that you are moving forward when you have a new call for proposal for people to say, we want to host the conference. So that's just a question. Ask it.
Yeah, that's important.
Humphrey. I'm in the learning sciences category and a math educator. And I would just say, I wouldn't come to NCME. I mean, at AERA, I'm busy doing AERA stuff, and then all the math conferences are like slapped up against the edge of that conference, so it's a pretty tough, although math's moving to the fall, so it'll be a little better, but it's a pretty tough go. But I just want to say that I see this conference as three groups: psychometricians, content, learning scientists, math and science educators, other writing experts. And I think it's the threeness that makes it really work for me. And I love it, actually. And I also love the time of year you have it. So it's like something that seems to have just fit in that time of year. And I don't like going to conferences very much anymore, but I really like this one. So I hope it stays as a special conference.
At NC State?
All right. One more comment on question number 1, and then we'll move on.
So Josh Wilson, University of Delaware. We, just to quickly concur, intimacy, the ability to connect with people, so important. So preserving it on its own, we felt, is critical. Whether that be annual or biannual, we didn't have a clear sense of. But the one thing to slightly dissent about is timing, and both timing of the year and day of the week. If we want to expand to other practitioners, September is probably tricky. And as one of my colleagues aptly said, the first month of school is probably tricky for people to take off of. So maybe even October. And then during the week, tricky for everyone. Weekends are tricky too, because you might lose some time with your family. But those are things we might think about. So that's it.
Thank you. I'd like to add to the record that when cornered during a break, Joshua Wilson also proposed doing the conference with his institution, maybe on the beach of Delaware. All right, now it's on the record.
It's on the record.
Okay.
We got volcanoes.
All right. Okay, volcanoes. We have lots of years. We'll be doing this for a long time. Okay, we have another question for you. Very different. How to increase the presence of classroom assessment on the NCME website. There's a little bit there. We've integrated into the glossary. And Caroline, what else have we done? Not much. Okay, a little bit, very little bit. What do you propose? What can you imagine? And what would be useful?
So my name is Yamila Reina, and I am from Denver Public Schools. And I just want to share how I found the conference. I had to look it up just now. So our district is focused on equity at its core this year. It's always been focused on equity, but really more so this year than ever. And I went to Google and just wanted to research the latest and greatest on who's closing the opportunity gaps in the country, specifically in urban school districts, and stumbled upon Schools of Opportunity. Went to that homepage, or looked and, well, what's this? Schools of Opportunity. What, Boulder? Oh, geez, I'm in Denver. Why have I never heard of this? I haven't heard of it. Clicked on that page, clicked on National Education Policy Center. I had to look this up just now. And on August 29th, when I looked it up, there was a blog called Data Walls Demoralized Students. Expert Lorrie Shepard explains why. Who's Lorrie Shepard? Got to the University of Colorado in Boulder. Oh my God, another person in Boulder. So what I'm saying is we need to talk about equity. And I think it's similar to assessment, that assessment doesn't live on its own. It's in context, and people have brought that up. And equity lives within that context, which was so wonderful to be a part of this conference. And it felt like, I will tell you from my perspective, no one in the district came to me and said, hey, you should go to this conference, even though I found out Denver Public Schools was one of the people behind it, or organizations. And so I think something with that said, I think we can talk. I felt like it was very open to teachers. I mean, it really said like anyone, come to this conference. I felt welcome to come. The cost was reasonable. And I really appreciate that I don't have to fly in and get a hotel. So that's what I have to share.
All right, thank you. Thanks for your persistence in Googling. Other thoughts about the website? Clearly, we can make this conference and our work as a task force more prominent there.
Hi,
Hi, Rick.
Rick Sinkins, Portland, Oregon. The answer depends on who in NCME wants to help, like the audience for the website. Because if it's the case that we're on the potential watershed time when policymakers need to think differently about assessment resources to help with that, it would be useful. If that's not the audience and it's school principals, then it turns, my point is that it turns on communicate with whom, about what. And historically, that there's been a very clear answer to that for NCME. It appears to be changing. Right? And so the question, another form of the same question is changing to what exactly?
And for whom?
And for whom?
Right.
And why? Yeah.
Right, so we need to answer this question in terms of who our audiences are, knowing that we have many now and would like more.
Scott Marion, Center for Assessment. So a lot of us get upset when people who don't know anything about measurement or assessment get in our work and in our way, right? And so similarly at the center, we've been engaged in this recently, is we're not communications experts. And so
Clearly.
we've been working with strategic communications folks to help us figure this out. And they'll start to ask you those questions. Who are you trying to communicate with? How are you trying to do it? And then they're able to actually, so I think NCME's got some money to maybe put towards
All right, right. Acknowledge our limitations in terms of the communication stuff and hire somebody who knows. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. What else? What else? Joshua.
I might be loud enough by myself. I don't lower your dangerous steps.
Thank you. Thinking about expanding memberships potentially, I can imagine, what if there were tiers of membership? Right now we have graduate memberships and professional membership. What if there was a practitioner membership who maybe is not so much interested in the full scale, all the cool IRT and all the cool stuff that maybe the professional members would be interested, but they really want access to the resources. Essentially, if we create some really good resources that are on our website, webinars or materials that could be put into practice, that could potentially expand membership, assuming it's inexpensive, but you could have maybe a classroom assessment member aimed at more practitioners. And maybe the full membership could also include that,
Yeah.
but maybe there's a tier possible.
All right, I'm going to take that as one more. Where are we going?
Hi, my name is Jim Voss from Farm Range Community College, and I want to dovetail on what was just said. We got here by accident. Excuse me.
Happy accident.
We are an underfunded community college, and we have a lot of assessment requirements as part of our load, and we just sort of try different things without a lot of research behind what we do. And so as a practitioner, it would be wonderful to have resources available to us that we could rely upon that are research driven and not just something that we thought up because we have to put it on our annual plan. And one of the reasons we ended up here was because of the equity thread. Some of us at our college are working with the Center for Urban Education out of USC. And so our administrative assistant was looking for conferences that had an equity theme, and so that's kind of what brought us here. And we were pleasantly surprised by all of the cool sessions that we went to. So thank you, and hopefully something on the website that would help us.
Great. Welcome. All right, so.
One procedural thing.
Yeah.
And it doesn't, I don't mind the exercise, but then you guys all have to wait for your colleagues. So if you will start to kind of line up here. I was doing it that way because then you can turn to your table and get them to back you up. But let's just be a little bit more efficient in answer to Heidi's questions by kind of getting in the line here. And the one thing I'll take the privilege of like to say is for websites, we can also build on Nancy's idea, which is to co-develop with a content area, NARS, for example, or NCTM, and think about things we would like to feature jointly about classroom assessments. Because the one thing I know when you're building websites is that you can't start to claim you have resources available and have it empty or old. And so the task force needs a strategy for how they would develop that strand of resources.
All right, thank you. Okay, line up. Question number 3. What assessment resources would be helpful to you in your role? And we're not talking just about web-based resources, although of course those can be on the list too. Think broadly, think creatively. We put your role here explicitly also because we know you play different roles. And so tell us your role and tell us what would be useful to you, and it will magically appear, I promise.
So hi, I'm Briggs, co-organizer for this conference and co-hosting this. We didn't actually get to this very much at our table, so I'm not going to, so this is all on me. This is something I actually said to Lorrie in thinking about the principles document she created. One of the things that I think that we don't do very well, we come up with a lot of things to complain about in terms of assessment, but we don't have a lot of great existence proofs for things that are really positive. So I think a resource that I'd love to see us develop are some case studies of where people are using assessment in ways that align with theory, that connect with practice and curriculum, and they can be targeted. You could have things at particular themes or demonstrate particular features, but this would be a go-to where people could say, if you want examples of where people have done this right, as a community, if you actually think this is really high-quality work, here's where you can find it. I think it would be really welcome for us to have this sort of policy.
Yeah, and to have that at NCME would be pretty.
Yeah, and that's not easy to do because you have to have sort of community agreement that this really does represent an exemplar, but that could be a valuable, so I'll connect these two. So one of the questions was the task force valuable term here that said, I think this should be a standing committee, right? And so one of the roles of the standing committee could be to help develop and maintain these exemplars and revisit them.
Yeah. Great. Great, thank you. What else? Practitioners, K-16, what might be useful to you? What resources are you looking for? Oh, sorry, go ahead, wherever you're from.
Hi, I'm Amelia Wells from Michigan State University, and we were talking, I'm point to my table for that, about preparing pre-service teachers. And so sometimes at Michigan State, we infuse assessment literacy into our content methods courses. And that works really well if the professors are assessment literate themselves or have those resources, but not all of them have the resources. And so potentially things you're thinking about, like little YouTube, like 5-minute videos from experts about certain things that we could use in our pre-service methods.
All right. What else?
Melissa Smith, Wake County Schools in North Carolina. One of the things that we spoke about that would be helpful for us at a district level is after a conference like this, if we connected with some folks that were working on performance assessments, that if we could meet other people, there was a list of other people who were working on performance assessments, and we could say, oh, after this conference, we can reach out and continue the conversation. We thought that would be really helpful to us.
That would be relatively easy to do. When people register, they could click a box, right?
Nancy Kellogg, and by the way, I'm from Boulder, and I would normally probably go to this conference either, but Lorrie was actually one of my professors when I worked on PhD many years ago. Anyway, one of the things that would be very useful for, I think, science education teachers, leaders, is basically a PLC guide or a leader's guide of how to best design classroom assessments and building in equity and those sorts of things. We could really use that in Colorado.
All right. We should wrap up by 1:30, is that right? Because we're going to take other questions. We should wrap up this part by 1:30.
We're scheduled to 2.
Okay.
And so, yes, we want to get all of our kind of expert decision makers about this input on the stage.
Yeah. So let's move to the last question. Our term is nearing its end. We've worked hard and enjoyed it. Speaking for myself, I think I can speak for everybody that this was a great opportunity. But we need to think about what's next. And what's next could be these 2 options here, but also a lot of other options. I should have put one that said, what else? Something else, an alternative idea. What do you recommend in order to keep this work going? Not just the work of the conference, but all this other stuff that we've talked about now. Our vision, I was talking to someone in the back there, that even the fundamental vision could change if the next task force or instantiation of it and the board agree that the vision needs to change, right? We just need people thinking about all of this. So how do we structure the group of people who think about and do all this? What do you recommend? Derek already made a recommendation that it's a standing task force. Standing committee, right, that's different.
I think we were in general agreement at this table. I certainly agree with the standing committee.
Okay.
I don't know what a SIG would do, but I think a standing committee has more authority. Sorry. That's code.
My table has abandoned me. I was just there listening, but they did raise concern, and of course they're backing me up right now, absolutely right. They expressed some concerns about being already members of the AERA, Classroom Assessment SIG, and how would this be different? And if I have a paper, where would I submit it?
Right.
And would that cause some conflict in any way, good or bad? But basically, that we already have a classroom assessment SIG that does that for us.
When we talked to the classroom assessment SIG about this, where's Leanne, including
she's one of the ones who left.
Me, because I'm in it, we said maybe a slightly different name would be good. That's as far as it got.
I didn't tell them you had talked to them because I was trying to just listen.
Right.
Maybe I should have.
No.
I should just, for all the local partners in the room, special interest groups, SIGs, are an AERA, the American Educational Research Association phenomenon. And the most significant thing about being a SIG in the AERA is that you get program slots. And so a non-negligible thing to think about is that if there were an NCME SIG, it would get program slots. And it could negotiate to overlap with the other SIG when it chose to. And they could expand the number of sessions because getting space to present is a commodity in those annual meetings.
That would be a strategic approach, yeah.
Just a question actually for Heidi. Sorry. Could you explain, are SIGs and organizational standing committees mutually exclusive? Like what, we had trouble answering this question because we weren't sure what the pros and cons of the different structures were.
Right, because it's not stated there at all what one would do that the other one wouldn't. They could overlap, they could complement, they could, they would be in conversation with each other, but the task force, just my perspective, not the task force, the committee, the standing committee, would oversee the work of the SIG, as I imagine it. And the SIG would be mostly functioning for the conference? No, you know what? That's an AERA conception of what SIGs do. We could do SIGs very differently, and NCME is going to have at least one, maybe two SIGs now. SIGs is a new thing for NCME, so we don't have to do the AERA model. We need to think, I think, much more creatively about it.
Yeah, I would answer the question we don't know, because NCME heretofore has never had SIGs. And I've not yet, my understanding is the procedure for setting up a SIG for NCME, any board members in the room?
To be determined.
Was just approved. And Scott, I think your hypothesis that a standing committee may have more authority than a SIG may be true, but I'm really interested in investigating the two.
And Mike Rodriguez, University of Minnesota. The board has talked a lot about this, and we do worry about fracturing the organization. We're relatively small. But we also want to give folks a sense of community and space. And so the SIGs were introduced as a way to elevate, bring some more prominence to certain groups within the organization. The first one that we're looking at, we have an acronym for it, and it's State Assessment and Local Assessment Directors. Sorry. And so these are not mutually exclusive. A committee would actually enter the organization as part of the governance and operating structure of the organization. And it really gives it more prominence and permanence, at least more than a task force, because the task force has a deadline. And so the committee certainly makes sense. And that would be completely separate from a SIG, although it could have a connection with the SIG. It could provide some organization support for a SIG. But the idea of the SIG is one that we really need to think about because I think it may be a way for folks that are not engaged in ARA, because I don't know if everybody in here is with ARA. We have a sense that about half of the members of NCME are also members of ARA, and so we know that there's not complete overlap. And we wonder if NCME might be a better home for some classroom assessment practitioners that don't connect with ARA. It could be another vehicle for them to be engaged in this kind of work. And so I really appreciate all of these different comments, and I think we have to think really broadly, but as a way to be inclusive, but also elevate and bring some prominence and position to the work that we've all been exploring the last couple of days.
Thank you. Other thoughts about our structure going forward?
My question is just simply, what is the role of the task force and how are the members selected?
Right. That's our question too. We have a role that's in the handout that you got. It's the vision and the, what do we call it? The vision, the goals, right? That's what it's been for 4 going on 5 years. The task force, the original task force was handpicked by Mark and Kristen and Dale. And now we're deciding how that's done going forward. So
yes, the one sort of procedural thing is that typically, so you're right that you don't have to have the ADRA model limitation, but typically a special interest group, people will sign up and ask to join. So that's everybody in NCME who wants to be in the group is joining the group, and that speaks to the issue of community. And that's different from formulating an agenda and pressing the board to do something. Now, the officers of the SIG could do that.
Yeah.
But more typically, a task force would try to get work done between meetings and then say to the board, will you adopt this, or will you approve a book about that? Or so there are some differences just generally apply, even though NCME does not have to just do it exactly
right.
like AERA.
And some AERA SIGs do more of what you just described then. They're in the minority, but we can be creative about how we do this. All right, what else? Other thoughts on anything? Something you think is worth sharing? You don't have to do it to the whole group. You know who we are by now. Okay.
Hello, everybody. My name is Capucine Chapman.
I'm the Director for Arts and Physical Education. I don't know one of the partners. I'm not quite sure where it's going to fit in here, but one of the things I really liked about this session, one of the presenters this morning, the keynote speakers, he said something about the assessment, and I'm going back to my notes, that students really wanted something that felt like home, you know, like a learning environment that was similar to a home environment. This session, this day and a half, has been probably one of the most valuable conferences I've attended that felt a lot more like home in the educational world. Really thinking about what's going on inside the student and how are we really trying to lean into the community as well as just the learning experience of the child and trying to connect all that together with this learning stuff that we need to do to really measure learning. It's just trying to tackle that question is a challenge, and I have been really fortunate to have, I agree with you, Derek, I let them walk on water. I mean, we've been so fortunate to have a partnership with someone who is engaged in listening to as well as lending their expertise, but being a really good thought partner. And my department, Arts and Physical Education, we've done our best to the best of our ability. We've done what we can to work with our regional team specialists, our teacher leaders, trying to bring in other content areas and principals and different director leaders, and we're trying to share some of the things that we're learning. It's not usually heard or listened to in the normal way, and I'm not sure where I'm going with this, but you did something right in this conference, and we've been doing our best to take one thoughtful step at a time with assessment and working with a bunch of really great people. And I think if we continue the journey of constantly being learners and not just doers and tellers, I think we could make a lot of progress. So I'm for classroom conferences and just keep doing this whatever way
Thank you.
we can.
All right, I will thank you for that. I will close by telling you what Jim Popham said to me. In true Jim Popham fashion, he said he thought the first question was dumb because anybody who was here and paying attention at this conference and didn't think we should do it every year was dumb. He's right there. We've heard some version of that message over and over and over, and it's really gratifying, and our hosts deserve another big round of applause. Thank you.
We are going to call this illustrious panel, the task force, to the podium. So, like I said, we weren't dismissing yet. You're still hanging in there. That's good. And while they're taking their places, I'm going to say a couple things about feedback about the conference. So you will be getting a survey. And even though you feel like you poured your hearts out already here, God bless you for that. We do need sort of a slightly more formal response from you and more details if you have them to share. That would be very wonderful. And also the principles document was meant to be a product of this conference. So we're going to revise it once in response to the feedback we've already received. 86 people of the 280 plus people who registered gave us their feedback. It was not narratively very detailed, so maybe we'll be able to say more. Because what I'm thinking now is that we will probably, there was lots of agreement.
Just, a couple inches is all I need.
Interestingly, only the one multimodal one had a significant disagreement. Others had anywhere from 0 to a maximum of 10% disagreement across all the principles. So we're going to be looking at your feedback, and then I think we're going to probably revise one more time, because what we we like to do, to Derek's point about examples, is use some things from the talks to elaborate the principles. So we're hoping that that will be something we can post. So when we ask you again for your comments, now you have more stake in it. I need another respond to the principles document also. And now, this group was asked pretty much in a phone call the questions that then Heidi put up there. So what I'm going to invite you to do, since you know questions 1, 2, and 4, is to take some turns either saying where you are on this, or what more do you need from the audience, because they've already said quite a bit, to help make a recommendation to the board. So let's imagine that this is the task force with brand new members, but also sunsetting sunsetting charge. You have to come together as a set of recommendations, not just the long list of things that the board members who are still here have heard. So could you do that? And then we don't need to have all 6 people talk about each thing. So I'll make sure that we kind of hear your thoughts on question number 1 about the future of the conference.
Sure. I'm still, personally, I still feel a bit in experiment mode about the future of the conference. We are trying something different in 2020. There will not be a conference in 2020. I was deeply touched by all of the enthusiasm in the room for having this conference again, and so I look forward to discussing that with the committee for 2021. I do think that Lorrie and Derek and Alina have set, and Kim have set an incredibly high bar for this conference, and the last 2 conferences at University of Kansas were great. The conferences are very, I mean, you can ask Lorrie and Derek and Alina and Kim. I mean, they're a lot of work, and to create what we felt here in the past 2 days is a lot of work from our minds and our hearts. So I think we have to think very carefully about the process for selecting who will host the conference. I share Lorrie's concern. When we had an RFP process, the proposals were of varying quality. And if we commit to having this every year, we run the risk of not having it as high quality as what we've seen the past 2 days. So for me, I'm still in where this is an experiment mode for me, personally.
I'd like to just tack a little on, just to emphasize that I think we need to keep our eye on a really important tension that was just surfaced. On the one hand, I love it that we're experimenting. We haven't calcified like AERA or NCME, and we're willing to try new things. I think that's important. On the other hand, when you experiment, you can fail, and you can not live up to the standards. And so we have to be really cognizant of that tension and how we manage it.
Originally, I was not in favor of a separate conference because I have spent 30 years feeling like classroom assessment was already marginalized in NCME. And as one of the ladies at my table put it well, it's sort of something that would brand us as other. Another thing that will brand us as other is not necessarily a good thing. But over the course of the conferences, over the years, the 3 years, what I think I've seen is an incubator for scholarship, some of which would not have been accepted at the main NCME conference, but which is tending, in my humble opinion, in that direction, and might actually be a good thing, so that, in the words of Mark's two-way influence, that the scholarship and research behind classroom assessment will the stronger it gets, the more likely it is that it will be heard by measurement professionals and actually make good contributions. So I'm now tending toward, this is a good thing to keep for a while. I also feel like our colleague Dale Whittington is not here, but if she were here, she would want you all to hear loudly that if we move this and just say eventually classroom assessment is part of NCME, that's all, and you can just be in April with everybody else, that district test directors and anybody in a district associated with assessment cannot come to a conference in April because that's testing season.
So I think we have,
go ahead. I was going to just say one other thing. I actually think the other thing that has emerged, particularly out of this conference, is that there is a third line of research that is getting brought in. So the task force was established to look at the relationship between measurement and classroom assessment, and I think what this conference showed was the focus was the relationship between teaching and classroom assessment. And I think as we move this forward, that's a third strand that needs to be reflected in the vision. It needs to be reflected in the work that we do going forward. And whether NCME, NCME either decides to accept that or not, but I think that is the place of classroom assessment. It's the relationship with teaching, and so that's a focus that, at least for me, I think is really important.
I do think that we've already proven through the conferences that this conference can perform an incubation process and a celebration. For that reason, I want us to go forward. I think for us to be successful within the NCME context, we need to bring that back into NCME. And that's really the bit of it that's the experimental bit that isn't yet designed. I don't think we really have that yet. We're going to be carrying on an activity next year, but I'm not sure it's the right one yet. So part of this experiment is continuing. What I worry about is if we continue this every year, would we be able to do the other every year too? I worry that that's too much for us to take on. And that's why we're sort of thinking about perhaps every other year having this conference, and in the years in between trying to find something that we do with NCME. So that's sort of one way to think of the future. Now, whether doing this every second year would be a bad thing because we'd lose momentum, that's another thing for us to find out. But these are the sort of discussions I think we need to have.
And I like is this on? Can you guys hear me? No? I like the idea of the both and. My teacher voice. I like the idea of the both and that Mark just shared, and I also wanted to complicate it a little bit because, thank you, thinking about whether or not it's feasible for NCME is one idea, but also thinking about what's feasible for attendees. So I had the privilege of sitting with folks from Wake County District in North Carolina, and the conversation about resources came up, but I also know I've had conversations with other colleagues of mine who are in the university sphere and have very limited dollars for how they can be developed professionally each year. And so folks that are not in this room might not be because they don't want to be, it might just be a pure issue of financing, and you gotta have to kind of choose which way you go. So I like the idea of the every other, because then it's not necessarily such a hard choice, because maybe you say to yourself, every other year, if that's what's offered, that's when I go to that conference, so I won't go to the things that are being pre-conference session at NCME. So I do think we have different stakeholders who have different resources that will allow them to participate in this wonderful experience, and we want to think about ways to be inclusive as we move forward.
Perhaps there are questions or comments from you guys.
Cost was important. Thank you. Cost was important in the table that I was a part of as well. Also fitting into the academic calendar. So doing it this fall and then in the spring is loading this year up for some folks. So that's kind of a logistical thing, but I like what Mark was saying about the fact that I think the way you said it, it's a moving the work forward way of thinking about each of these strategic choices, and I think that that's kind of what the task force is question about the standing committee versus recommissioning a task force. So Kristen is going to jump in on that.
Yeah. I think just from the discussion we had a few minutes ago, I'm excited to go back and talk with the task force and the board about the idea of doing both a standing committee, because that's how you influence the board. That's how you do things between the annual conference. That's how you do things like support a separate conference on whatever cadence makes sense. Whereas in my mind, unless I'm misunderstanding Michael, a SIG is really about the standing committee membership is very small because committees need to be small, whereas a SIG can be as big as it wants to be, and then also influences the slots on the annual conference program. So I am now more clear that they have different functions, and I think we need both. That's my personal opinion, but I'm excited to explore that with the task force and the board.
You just gave me an idea.
Okay. I'm very enthusiastic about both. Because when you have a SIG, people join it, and then you have colleagues. If SIGs end up taking root and being an NCME thing, but I definitely think we should be a standing committee, because that forces the board to have us on the agenda, get an annual report, and forces us to do things, and it's a way that we can institutionalize Mark's vision of making sure that educational measurement is broadened out to include some things it needs to include, including probably teaching. But in addition, one of the ideas raised at my table, and not by me, is that this person is on another standing committee, testing and diversity, or diversity and testing, whatever it's called. And she said that their charge was to investigate issues of diversity in large-scale testing. And she said that charge needs to be revised and I'm wondering, I need to get, there's a handbook, it's like 200 pages long, it's a ridiculous document, but I need to get that out and see how many of these other charges need to be revised for other standing committees, because that also would put classroom assessment, we need our own standing committee, but we also need to that would make us less other, and it would make it more integrated into the, I thought it was a brilliant idea. Yeah. And if she hadn't left, I would use her name, but I'm going to be all over that, waving flags and everything.
This is making me think that I agree that we need both, but they should be in close communication with each other. So I think Nicole Barnes will back me up on this, that the SIGs at AERA are not really influential at all, right? We're not in, we've both been officers in the classroom assessment SIG, and that as officers in that SIG, we had sort of nothing to do with the leadership of AERA, and they had nothing to do with us, frankly. It's a big organization, but NCME is pretty big, and so I am going to propose that the standing committee serves not just to communicate with the board and carry on some of the larger long-term tasks, but also oversees, directs, serves as officers for the SIG. Maybe? Somehow, so that they're related and not completely distinct.
Yep.
One of the things that's been worrying me about the SIG is that it might seem to form a sort of a core for this group, that not everyone could be part of, not everyone wants to be part of NCME who might want to come here. And so there's sort of like, there might be levels of membership of this, but the suggestion that we could have a classroom members or associate members or something, and that would make them fully members of NCME. And so, for instance, they'd be able to download those papers for free that I was pointing out in GEM, etc. I think that's a way to broaden that membership and allow
softer boundaries around the membership. I think that'd be a very positive thing.
And
And in addition to potentially broadening membership, also that working session idea that's come up a couple of times this afternoon, where folks want to know, like, how can we keep in touch with others who are doing phenomenal work? And so that's one of the benefits of the state, that it is driven by member interest, it's driven by the idea that communities who care about the same topic, the same theme, can work together and spin-offs and collaborations. And so it sounds like that is something that could be beneficial for folks to be thinking about what's next, not just from an NCME organizational standpoint, but also like from a personal, professional standpoint, what's next for me, and how do I stay invigorated throughout this year, and not just have to wait until the next conference to feel inspired. So I think that can be beneficial.
I'm going to have some questions about last call. So Jim has something to say, and I'm going to give you, like, we have 10 more minutes, but I'm going to end in 5 minutes because you're all so tired. And you will take the last 5 minutes to embrace someone in this core group, and this is the really hardcore group who's still here, to engage the last 5 minutes with a presenter or with someone else here that you learned something from. And we're going to let Jim have a comment and anyone else who wants to comment.
I think the discussions of structure to first, to have the organization somehow in charge, persevere, that's good stuff. And I would leave that to those who are more familiar with the nuances of NCME and so on. But what kind of troubles me, with all of you at the front, is that this was something terribly special. Terribly special. And for you not to offer it next year, well, my pitch is diminished dumbness. You can't do it. There's not enough time. No, there's enough time. Get it done. And you want
You do it.
as well, but really diminished dumbness.
Thanks.
Compelling thoughts.
With alliteration.
So I have to claim ignorance of I know some of you up there. And this kind of comes out of something that Derek was saying a little bit earlier. And this theme of classroom assessment, which is that if we are to model, and I'm getting your name on it, and I'm sorry. Sue. Yes. I really appreciate what you're saying about the importance and sidelining of classroom assessment. If that's going to be something that moves forward, right, then perhaps it should be considered in terms of the committee that we would represent the classroom on the committee. And the reason why I say it went back to something I was thinking about when Derek was speaking, which is that he was talking about those exemplars as a resource. Mm-hmm. So that would be from a research perspective, but those are also housed in implementation in schools and districts and classrooms, right? And so the exemplar, I think, would inherently and necessarily include the exemplar in the classroom. So I'm not sure, like, thank you for doing what you're doing. I think it's important and amazing, and perhaps it can also include that aspect on the committee, like district level, school level leaders. I don't know. So I'm wondering what your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Last thoughts. Come on, guys. I got some nods.
Yeah.
And particularly as we're talking about expanding membership to include practitioners.
Yes, I think that if I understand the SALAD SIG, that's the state assessment and local assessment directors, and perhaps through partnership with them or through the volunteers that we get from the people who have attended this conference, we can broaden the perspectives represented on the forthcoming standing committee or forthcoming SIG. I agree strongly with that.
Dale, who couldn't be here for personal reasons, he speaks up for that at every one of our meetings. So we do have that perspective, but it is only one person, that's true.
Oh, wait a minute. No, I Can I ask a question?
You can ask a question and they can answer briefly.
Okay.
Oh, well then.
Sue, you mentioned, and I think this is important, you felt in some ways NCME hadn't recognized classroom assessment, and you've been waiting 30 years for that. And I
Just waiting.
You know, anyway, how...
Well, not just waiting, but yes, waiting.
Okay, oh, you're right. So, my name is Rusty Calvin, I'm on the board. We were talking about membership tiers, and at the risk of, maybe I'm imagining this, dividing up, or if we had a tier for classroom assessment or something, would we be like dividing people? What's the perspective on that?
I personally would have to give that some thought. If there were tiers, which I think is a brilliant idea, but there would be full membership. I'm not sure I personally, I'm just speaking for myself now, and I'm not even sure I'd agree an hour from now, but at the moment I'm thinking we don't want a classroom assessment special baby membership, but we might want a practitioner membership that a state assessment director might want. He's a practitioner, she's a practitioner, or somebody like Dale, who was a district assessment director. She's a practitioner. And so I'm thinking if we do tier membership, and we were to have a little meeting right now, I would be arguing for something like a practitioner membership or an associate membership or something that didn't, so that all of these people could do that, but so could some others, and it wouldn't be just our special little cheap classroom assessment.
There you go.
I think it's a really good question. You could have an associate membership that recognize the overlaps you'd like to have for whom NCME is not their primary affiliation. We have had it happen that sometimes people, for cheapness, dissemble about this issue, but the concept would be if you're primarily a measurement and psychometric person, you should pay full freight. And if this is, if you're in Norris, for example, or a practitioner in a state department or in a district, you can be an associate member.
I think that'd be great.
And we welcome you to tell us your other affiliation, because that's the way we're going to form these partnerships. Last thought from the panel, and then we're going to dismiss.
Can I just say something real quick? Because I don't want to sue your comment about how classroom assessment may be isolated in the organization. We heard that. It's really funny that hasn't come up before. And you may have been thinking about it, and you may have said it, and we haven't heard it. But that is something we can absolutely do. And we're in a really good position this year, needing to put E back into NCME and with our current president's focus on education. And so I think we're gonna really take a deep look at that and how we talk about testing and assessment in all the governance and operational organization of the NCME. So I really appreciate it.
I'd like to thank everyone who stayed here to help us with our thoughts and our plans, and we will try and do better, Jim. I promise you.
I want you all to give the panel a hand, but let's get a hand for you. This is a hardcore. Thank you.
Thank you.